5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Diary of a Kidney Warrior. Sharing faith, knowledge, hope, and love.
Hi, and welcome to Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. My name is Dee Moore, and I am a Stage 4 Kidney Warrior. This podcast is dedicated to encourage, educate, and inspire as we explore all aspects of kidney disease, chronic illnesses, and health. If you have any questions or ideas for future topics you would like me to cover, please do get in contact with me on social media using the handle Diary of a Kidney Warrior. In today's episode, I am bringing you a Kidney Warrior story. Now, there's always something you can learn from someone's story, something that can bring inspiration and hope. My guest today is transplant recipient Faduma Dhool. Faduma is an economic development professional who got diagnosed in 2018 with end-stage renal failure. After 6 months of dialysis treatments, Faduma was blessed with a second chance at life thanks to her brother's kidney donation. She is currently thriving at 18 months post-transplant and uses her online platform to advocate for kidney warriors, increase awareness on the importance of kidney health and what life post-transplant looks like. Hi and welcome to Diary of a Kidney Warrior, the podcast. How are you doing today, Faduma?
I'm doing good, Dee. How are you doing?
I am good, and looking forward to chatting with you and getting to know more about your story. I'm going to kick off with my first question, which is, how did your Kidney Warrior journey begin and how were you diagnosed?
Thank you, Dee. So, hi everyone. My name is Faduma, and I was diagnosed back in 2018. I think I would say my Kidney Warrior journey started really a few months before I got diagnosed. Wasn't aware of my condition until it worsened to that critical point where I started having these physical symptoms. And so this was towards the end of 2018. I was traveling quite a lot back then. And I had just come back to visit my family here in Nairobi, Kenya, when I started feeling really, really ill. And it was really sort of GI symptoms, stomach-related symptoms. And so my family and I, our first conclusion or our first idea of why I was feeling so ill was just, it has to be stomach-related. Maybe I ate something really bad during one of my travels or, have a stomach bug or something. And so all the doctors that I first saw were all gastroenterologists, stomach specialists. Yeah, because we were so convinced that this must be a stomach issue. And so I was misdiagnosed for those first 4 or 5 months when I was feeling really sick. And the medication that I was prescribed for was for a bacteria called H. pylori, which a lot of us have in our systems, in our stomachs. They can be dormant bacteria. But it's something that is quite common. And so I was prescribed something called the H. pylori kit, which really, it was horrible medication. It just really worsened things. And the side effects just got worse and worse. I was really nauseous a lot of the time. I just couldn't keep anything down. I started losing sleep. There was one time where I couldn't sleep for 3 days in a row. Wow. So those 4 months leading up to my correct diagnosis was a huge challenge for myself and my family. Just not knowing what was going on and just hanging on to that incorrect medication, thinking, no, I just have to push through and keep taking it. It did cause nausea, the medications themselves. And so every time I would go back to different doctors, they'd just say, keep taking the medication, you'll be fine. You just need to power through. And I just think it's that idea that, hey, she's in her mid-20s, it has to be H. pylori, can't be anything else. I looked physically fine.
Yeah.
I didn't look chronic sick, they just assumed, you just have just this tiny bug or something that's bothering you. So you need to just take this medication, you'll be fine. I didn't really have any physical symptoms of distress other than, the nausea and the vomiting and all of that. And so we made the decision, towards November, towards late November, early December, to just stop taking that medication because it was clearly not helping me and it was making things much worse. I was dehydrated to some point, and I remember going to a local clinic just to get, just to get more hydration in me. So just getting attached to a drip and just helping me get more hydrated because, as I said, I wasn't keeping anything down. It was really horrible. And so finally went to the last doctor, the fifth doctor, who got my diagnosis right. But he is a gastroenterologist as well. I was a little bit ill, as most kids are when they're young. And so my dad keeps a meticulous medical record for all of me and my siblings. And so he noticed that there was a particular gastroenterologist back in the day that I had gone to see when I was about 8 years old. At that time, I was facing some GI issues, and he was a doctor that found out that I was actually born with one kidney. Oh. And so my dad found that medical record, and he's like, you know what, why don't we pay him a visit? Maybe he's still alive, he's still around, And so on the 20th of December, 2018, we went to his office. He was the first doctor that checked my vitals, asked about my history. And when he noted that I was born with one kidney, and that my blood pressure was super high at that time. I think it was roughly 180 over 120.
Wow.
So he was like, you know what? I'm just going to ask you to do a full blood work. Come back the next day. He's like, but I suspect it's your kidney that's causing all of these issues. And so came back the next day on the 21st. I remember it was on a Friday. Walked into his office once again with my mom. And he had a quick scan of my lab results, and he's like, yeah, your kidney is failing. You are at end stage. From the little he knew about kidney failure, he's like, you need to get admitted. You need to go to the emergency room. You need to first of all, have your blood pressure lowered as much as possible because it's crazy high. And you need to you need to contact any of these nephrologists. And at that time, it was around the holidays, like we are right now. So all the nephrologists that we were initially recommended to were all away on vacation or just out of the office. It took us a while to pin down a local nephrologist to help us out. But I think just during that diagnosis time, I remember when he gave that correct diagnosis, it was just, thank goodness we know what is going on right now. I was relieved. I felt like I could finally relax and just let, the medical world heal me and that I would be okay in 2 weeks max, maybe. I just had no clue the extent to which, to how sick or how ill I was. At that time, I was actually feeling much better because, as I said, the medications I was taking, I just stopped. And so the symptoms sort of wore off from that medication itself. So feeling super weak, but just back to my oldish self. But I remember just being in the emergency room and having all of these nurses and the people who were administering the drip and just checking my blood pressure and all of that, just letting me know that, hey, you need to start thinking about dialysis. You need to have the procedure to put in, a catheter and get your first treatment because you need it. There's no if, when, it's now. Wow. And I just remember my family and I were in denial for the first 4 or 5 days after my diagnosis because we just couldn't believe that my kidney was just at that critical stage where I needed treatment. And dialysis at that time was just such a foreign concept, sounded like a very invasive procedure. And if I accepted it, that it would be giving up and accepting that this would be my life. So my family and I just kept trying to get second, third, fourth, fifth opinions, doing lab tests at different labs outside of the hospital, sending my lab results to like any of the family, friend doctors that we knew, just trying to get a second opinion. And the results, came back pretty much the same. Didn't change much because I wasn't receiving any treatment. So I think on a Sunday or like 3-4 days after that, we decided to just, it's best to just get a temporary catheter, see if that will help. Just get a temporary catheter placed in on my chest. It was right here, and just have my first dialysis treatment done. And I think and even the medical team were just like, maybe you need just a few treatments. Maybe it's an acute kidney failure. Like maybe after a few treatments, you'll get better. But I remember after my first dialysis treatment, I started feeling much better. It was insane. Just my appetite came back. My nausea levels were quite low. I just like my energy levels came back. I mean, even though my first few dialysis treatments were a little bit painful, just like my body getting used to that, it helped me. It saved me. And I mean, obviously my lab results kept getting better and better because the toxin levels in my system were being reduced because of the dialysis treatments. But then we decided to get, another opinion outside of Kenya. And so that's when my family and I decided to just head back to the US and go to the Mayo Clinic, which is one of the most reputable transplant centers in the US. And ended up staying there and just having my dialysis treatments at DaVita, for the Americans who know of DaVita, and then just immediately started the transplant process. So my journey really started from that time 2 years ago.
So it's a very rapid progression. I mean, so much to take in. One day you think, everything's normal and everything's okay. And then suddenly to be told that you need to go on dialysis. And so mentally, that must have been really tough. And you mentioned about the denial and coming through that denial process to realize that actually this was something that you needed to do. So was it hemodialysis that you started with?
Yeah, I did. And I tried my level best to stick with hemo and not move to PD or fistula. So I did hemodialysis to my chest. And like you said, I feel like I skipped from denial to acceptance. I feel like I didn't have that time to properly grieve because of how fast things went, like you said. It was just go, go, go. Like, what do we need to do? Where do I need to go next? What is the process? What do I need to learn? What do I need to educate myself on? And what gave me that sense of calm was taking control over my situation as much as I could. And so it was as simple as actually participating in the conversations that the doctors were having with me. So when they would come to my room, instead of just like listening to what they would tell me, just asking questions, or even as simple as just repeating what they said, just letting them know I am part of my medical team too. Like I want to know what is going on with me and not just say, yes, okay, fine. Yeah, I'll take that medication. I'll do this. But asking, what does this medication do? How will it help me? What is my kidney function at? So that helped me feel like I was getting a little bit of that control that I felt like I lost when I was diagnosed. And I honestly feel like the grieving part didn't really kick in for me. It would sort of jump out of me every once in a while when I was going through really low moments. I personally still think that I am grieving in some ways, even after transplant. Every time, just like reflecting back on the journey that I am on and how far I've come. and just how much I feel like I lost those first few months when I was diagnosed. And so the grieving part is still a process for me. It's still part of my journey, just because of how everything just, went so fast for me, because I was only on dialysis for 6 months, and that was hemodialysis with a catheter. I was very adamant on not moving to a fistula, just because, again, I think moving to a fistula for me was accepting that this is going to be permanent. And I was very hopeful that the transplant process would be quick and soon, but I had to change my catheter at least 3 times because it was giving me issues. And that's why they prefer you move to a fistula or to do peritoneal dialysis, PD, the one that you do at home.
Yeah.
But I was just like, no, that's not me. I'm not going to do that. I suffered with my catheter, honestly. There were days I would be at treatments at the dialysis centers, and my blood pressure would skyrocket through in the middle of treatment, or one of the tubes would get blocked. And that caused me a lot of distress. And again, that feeling that, I can't even control this tube that's sticking out of my neck. It's not working with me. So I know a lot of us feel that way, that you're losing that control over your life. The little that we actually have, even before something tragic happens to you. I think when you have something tragic happen to you, I think you realize how little control you have over your life. And so I would get reminders like that, throughout my journey, throughout dialysis and the transplant process. And what helped me, feel that sense of calm was, getting that control back by being involved in my own health, but also just having a support system from my family, from close friends, relying on others too, and knowing that I can't really do this alone. Sometimes you want to, sometimes you're like, I can do it. I can take myself to dialysis, or I can make my own meals, but especially when you're dialysis or any throughout the stages of kidney disease, you get fatigued. You need that support. You need someone who will help you with your cooking, or someone to keep you track on your diet. So that support system was everything to me those first 6 months, and even after transplant, and even up to today. And I'm so grateful that I had that support system to rely on, just to help me through it all.
You talked about a lot there when you mentioned about loss, and I think that's something every person with a every person with a chronic illness can relate to, because as you said, it's that point when you realize that your life is not going to be the same again, and that is something out of your control. And I totally relate to that. And I have a saying that you have to be your own health manager. And I really believe that, as you said, taking back that element of control that you do have, as you said, asking those questions about your medication, being empowered with the knowledge of knowing what it's for, how it's going to help you, and also weighing up, because every medication comes with side effects, as you know, weighing up whether you want to actually go through that. Is it worth it? Is the pluses more than the minuses? So I really believe it's so important, as you said, to ask those questions, and not to be afraid to ask the questions. They are there to take care of you. So not to be afraid to ask questions and get more insight into, what decisions are being made about you and about your health. And yeah, I really do. I agree with you totally that it helps you to come to terms with things, and it helps you to feel that, you haven't lost control over absolutely everything. There still is some control there. What do you think, what was it about the fistula that, because you mentioned that you were deterred, even though you were going through so much to have the catheter? What was it about the fistula that was different to the catheter? I'm mixing up my words today. What was it about? Sorry.
Yeah, totally different.
What was difference?
What was different about the fistula, right?
Yeah,
like
versus the catheter.
Yeah. Well, the fistula is a bit of it's more of a procedure than having a catheter placed on your chest. And the thing is, for a fistula, it takes around, if I'm not wrong, 3 to 4 months for it to properly build. For it to properly build up before you actually can use it.
Right.
And so I think that time factor, because a catheter is, once it's placed, you can immediately start using it. But for a fistula, it's a procedure. It takes at least 3 to 4 months for you to for it to build before you can actually use it. And just seeing the experiences from the other dialysis patients when I was going for my treatments, how painful a fistula can be. It has less sort of complications during the actual treatments, because there's no, the machine would go off on you, or like nothing would get blocked. There's no tubes or anything. It's just really big needles like sticking to a really big artery on your arm. But I think I was just frightened with the idea that once you get a fistula, it actually stays with you even after a transplant. You can take it off if you'd like after you receive a transplant, but it is another procedure on its own to have your fistula sort of removed or disentangled. And there's pros and cons to a catheter versus fistula. And I think I did a post about this last year on Instagram, and I was myself going through that, making that decision. And I think the pros for fistula is, yes, it is time intensive, like it is a permanent sort of structure, for lack of a better word, on your arm, visible, but the great thing about it is that you can have it for as long as you want, even after you receive a transplant. And, in case, for some reason your kidney starts failing again, which eventually it may, even if you receive a transplant, but if it does sooner than you think it would, you'll have, a very quick access on your arm. You can immediately go to dialysis, instead of having a catheter placed again. So I was really at like my end's wit, honestly, with choosing between a catheter and fistula. I just kept pushing against like my medical team. They're like, you need to think about a fistula. What are your thoughts? Because my third catheter was really giving me problems during my last dialysis runs. And I just kept pushing back, just saying, just 2 more weeks. I'll get back to you next week. I'll get back to you next month. We're really close in finalizing the transplant process. We're hopeful that it will be soon, which it was, thankfully. But honestly, if my transplant process wasn't finalized in June of last year, I think by July, August, I would have needed to get a fistula. So I just personally tried my level best to prolong my my time with the catheter as much as possible, but it was honestly a pain. Catheters are not, there's just higher risk of infection because it's just right there on your chest. It's really a gaping wound. Obviously it's dressed over, but you need to take good care of it. You can't take showers. You can't, it's just, catheter also has its cons, a lot of it, but it's something temporary that you can just remove once you're done with it, hopefully when you get a transplant. And so I think that was just my mindset, was get a fistula, I would be giving up, and I would be, once again, really setting in stone that this dialysis will be here to stay with me for a while. And I was just so against that. My family was too. I guess, in essence, that denial part didn't really leave after diagnosis. It sort of stayed with me. It's like, no, this cannot be my life. I cannot, be stuck to a machine. I mean, the other option is also to do PD at home. Mm-hmm. You don't need a fistula for that. But as I said, I had traveled to Minnesota, away from home, away from really where I was raised and all of that. And so I just didn't have the space to do PD at home, because you need that space to store supplies and to have a clean area just to yourself, which wasn't possible for me because we were traveling quite a lot, just between the transplant center at the Mayo Clinic, from the other city that we were in, where we had close relatives. And so there's a lot of moving around. So PD wasn't an option for me. So it was really fistula, catheter. And thankfully I really did not have any clue what was going to happen in the next coming weeks, months, but just super grateful that my transplant process was finalized just when my third catheter was giving me the most issues. So it just sort of all came together, thankfully, just at that very last minute. But yeah.
So you went on to have a transplant. So tell me about that process. How did that come about? Right.
So as I mentioned, once we sort of had the second, third, fourth, fifth opinions of my diagnosis, we decided that, as I started my dialysis treatments, we simultaneously started the transplant process. And, starting the transplant process is as simple as just understanding what it takes to start it to begin with. So it just took a lot of conversations with other transplant patients that my family knew, that we knew. And it's crazy how when you're going through something is when you suddenly realize that other people within your circle that are going through it too. You're like, oh yeah, I know this person. It doesn't really cross your mind until it actually happens to you, or until it happens to someone close to you. And so it was just really understanding that process from them, from people who went through it, and just figuring out what would be the best place to have it done. And seeing as I am a dual citizen, Kenyan and American, I had the option of going back to America, which I did, first of all, to get another opinion. But then once we were there, realizing that, it's best to stay here and start the transplant process while I have my dialysis treatments 4 times a week. And again, zoned in on the fact, everyone that we talked to encouraged us to go to the Mayo Clinic. Because, as I mentioned, they are sort of one of the best transplant centers in the US, in the Americas. And so it was really just starting that process with them. So it is a very extensive process, the transplant process, because it's just, first of all, applying for it. And then there is the evaluation aspect where they first evaluate you to see if you are, a potential recipient. If, other than the fact that your kidneys are failing, are there any other underlying conditions that can hurt your transplanted kidney? And so it was very time intensive. And also just at first, I think the idea that we had was that, all you need to understand is, if the potential donors that you have, what blood type are they? So my mom was the same blood group as I was. So the idea was my mom would be the best candidate to first get tested. And then we realized it was just a learning journey for us too, just learning different things, new aspects, new information. And it can be a very frustrating process, because it's, that urgency that you want it to happen ASAP. But then there's just that, communication aspect. There's that time period, and realizing that, you can't get, answers within the week, you have for months even, and it was a lot of going back and forth, even just transportation wise, going on a 3-4 hour journey, staying in in a smaller town, in another town, finding another dialysis center while I was there, because it is a 1 week evaluation process at the Mayo Clinic. So finding, arrangements to stay there, and it was just a really extensive process. And we decided that it would be best for my siblings to first get tested if they could be potential donors, because we realized the younger the better, the younger and the closer in age to me as well. And all my siblings and my dad, everyone was back home in Kenya. So it was just trying to coordinate with a local lab in Nairobi, getting those initial tests done at a local lab, sending that to the Mayo Clinic. It was really like a lot of back and forth, a lot of coordination, and lots of bumps along the way. But I think, once again, it was just owning that process as much as we could, and just taking that initiative and not waiting for the team to get back to us, so just reminding them, like, hey, we're still waiting on you to give us some feedback on this, where are we at on this, just slightly pushing back, and not waiting for them to always make that initiative to reach out to us. And so at some point we just made the decision, why don't we wait for the team at the Mayo Clinic to let us know, out of all my siblings, who would be the most, who was the best match. We just made a guess and decided, let's bring my brother, who's the youngest out of all of us. Let's bring my brother in to come visit us. And then while he's here, why not get tested? Why not, really continue the extensive process to evaluate him as well? And so we did that. And we did that between last year, like March to around June. So April, May, June, only 3 months, but I don't know, in that moment, it felt like eternity that it was taking so long. But I know from conversations with other transplant patients, it takes years, months. It's just really hard finding that match. And I was just blessed to have my brother be a match, and he was the first one that got tested. So I was lucky on that first try, and he had his own separate team, his donor team, and I had like my recipient team. And so again, there was just there's no proper crossover communication until it was finalized. So I do remember getting that call from my recipient team, one of the nurses on my team, just letting me know, hey, it's finalized. Your brother is a donor. He is a match, and you can now set a date for your transplant. And I think we were all just so excited that it was finally here. I think I wanted to set it at like 3-4 days from the day that she called me, which was a bit rushed because, as I mentioned, the hospital, the Mayo Clinic, was in another town, about 3-4 hour drive from us. And we needed to figure out accommodations, figure out what we needed to get set up for major surgery, and also just having reinforcements come in, like that support system. Because at that time, it was just me, my brother, and my mom. And so just having that reinforcements to support my mom as well, because taking care of 2 people who go into major surgery can be a lot. And so had the date set for the 25th of June, 2019. And it really went so fast. Like once the date was set, everything's just sort of spiraled from there. It just happened so fast. And we had as much of a lot of our family from all across the States come to offer their support and visit us. And again, having that support system was just out of this world, just amazing. And it just helped give me that sense of calm, because I mean, receiving a transplant, a second chance at life, is an unbelievable, experience, and you feel so grateful and blessed, but it can be really scary as well and very overwhelming. And so having family around us, sort of those days before surgery, and also most importantly, having them support my mom as well, because she was with me from the minute I was diagnosed up until that day. And I think throughout this process, just realizing how, patients go through a lot. We go through it, we live through it day by day, but so do our caretakers to some extent. And I was just really grateful that, our family could show up for me, my brother and my mom, because we were all going through it together. It was really, it was both of her children going through a major surgery that day. So a very emotional day. But yeah, honestly, I keep telling people that 25th of June and the days leading, the days after that were one of the best days of my life. It's even though you went through such a major surgery, you just feel like you were literally born again. Like everything tasted much better. The air smelled differently. I'm not kidding. It did. I just had this like renewed energy just coursing through my body, coursing through my veins. And even though it was an excruciating pain, I was just so happy. And my skin color came back, the life on my face came back. My eyes were brighter. You know what I mean? Like food tasted much better. I just had this energy that I never felt in so long. And it just made me, in that moment, realize how sick I was, even before those 4 months of having those physical symptoms, that I was probably sick for years because I just couldn't remember the last time I actually felt that way, which was crazy. But yeah, so recovery for me was an amazing experience. I really hold those first few months close to my heart. And Rochester, Minnesota was the most amazing place to recover. I really loved the post-transplant care team that I had, that my brother and myself had, and just the level of care that we received during those first few delicate months. It was summer in the US. It was just an amazing time. Again, just feeling like renewed and just having this, I don't know, really second chance at life is really the best way to put it. But yeah, so I'm now 1 year and 6 months post kidney transplant. As of tomorrow. So as of tomorrow, I'll be 1 year, 6 months. But every day that passes, every month, just gives me that time to reflect. I've realized, through this journey, one of the things that I have learned is, taking that time to reflect and pause on how far you've come. I don't think I ever used to do that, partly because, there's that belief that you're in your 20s, it's go, 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 you need to get your education, you need to get your job, you need to get that job experience, start your career, even in your 20s, there's that pressure of getting married and having kids. Like there's just a lot going on, a lot of movements, it's such a fast-paced environment that we all live in general. But I feel like there's that pressure in your 20s as well. And I don't think I ever gave myself that time to just stop, pause, reflect. And I had a lot of that. I had a lot of time to do that when I was focusing on my health last year. And now that I'm on the other side, sort of post-transplant, I try my level best to not take this gift for granted. And every anniversary, every 25th of every month is a reminder to me. Or every time I see my scars, it's a reminder of what I went through, what my family and I went through to get to where I am. And it just renews that gratefulness because, sometimes life can get to you. Yeah. Or sometimes you can be really in the middle of it and you don't realize, sort of the blessings that you have surrounding you. And so the 25th of every month just reminds me of how far I've come and, the people that helped me to get there. And just try to live my best life and really, not taking this second chance in life for granted. But it's hard doing that with COVID because that fear cripples you. You're like, no, I need to protect myself at all costs. I need to protect this gift at all costs. But then there's that other side of you where you have this second chance at life. You want to use it to the maximum and take advantage of it. It's just a delicate balance at the moment, but doing what I can.
So It sounds like, transplant has made a humongous difference to your life, and your brother, your hero. So he's given you an amazing gift, and so you've talked about the difference that it made in a positive sense of you smell better, the food tastes better, everything, you got more energy and all the wonderful things that having the transplant has given you.
Right.
Has there been any challenges post-transplant in terms that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, I think first that knowing that you have this huge responsibility, and I think that's why the pre-transplant process can be so extensive because, in that evaluation process where you are evaluated to be a potential recipient of an organ, of a transplanted organ, it's just that you're also tested mentally, psychologically, if you are capable of taking care of this organ going forward. And after receiving that transplant, I sort of understood why, that aspect is part of the pre-transplant process, because it is a day-to-day responsibility. There are, I think I also had that misconception that, once you receive a transplant, you're all set, you're good, you're healed, you don't have to think about treatments anymore, you're good to go. But realizing that it is a lifestyle on its own. And those first few weeks, as I said, were just, out of this world for me, an amazing experience, but also a little bit overwhelming because felt like I was in a mini crash course on how to maintain my life post-transplant. And so being introduced to all the medications I'll be taking lifetime, how frequently I'll be taking them, the importance of taking them, if you miss a dose, what will happen to you? What do you need to do if that happens? And then also just generally keeping a diet and an active lifestyle, which, the active, healthy lifestyle aspect is recommended to everyone, but I feel like it's more heightened when you're chronically ill or when you've had a transplant, where for you, it's like, no, you really need to keep a good diet and keep active. And so it was overwhelming, and I found that a bit challenging, just it brought a lot of anxiety in me, to be honest, because honestly, after today, my worst nightmare is missing a dose of my medication. Literally, I can wake up sometimes and I'm like, oh my gosh, did I take my second dose of medication today? I'm like, yes, you did, Faduma. Yes, you did. So anxiety has been a constant in my life, ever since diagnosis, through dialysis, even up to today, post-transplant. And just, I think, realizing the weight of taking your medications, twice a day and not missing anything. It's a challenge, because even with the medication aspect, I'm now fairly confident that I can manage it, putting all the alarm systems on my phone and just having everything much easier, like just structuring my time, my daily schedule around it. But also I think there's also that aspect of the side effects of these medications, because they are they can be quite serious, and every single person is different, and how the medication affects you can be different. I know I had a difficult time those first few weeks, the first few days actually, post-transplant, specifically with one medication called Celcept. It just gave me a lot of GI issues, a lot of stomach-related issues, but I found a walkaway around that. So personally, I take my medication with food. I know some are not recommended to do that, but for me, it works that way for me. And I know my team just really recommended that, once you start, the way you start taking medication, just try as much as you can to do that forever. And so if you take it with food, take it with food. And for me, I started traveling because I'm now back in Kenya, and I traveled back to Kenya 4 months post-transplant. So I had to deal with that time difference aspect. And so I think in a nutshell, really, post-transplant life is just really, really putting your health first before anything. And I know I did that a lot, even with dialysis, but now more so it's just really structuring my life around my health. And so things that I used to enjoy doing, like spontaneity, is not, it's not there anymore. I have to think about, do I have enough supplies of my medication to go on a trip if I wanted to? Or, like just, especially now post-COVID, just taking those extra measures. And so for me, I reached my 6-month mark post-transplant right when the pandemic started. And so, I was very aware even before COVID that I had a weakened immune system, and I was taking the precautions that we now take before COVID struck, wearing the face masks and avoiding people who are ill and all of that. And so I was sort of lessening that for myself. I was like, you know what, I've reached my 6-month mark. I don't really need to like avoid people anymore. I don't need to wear face masks as much anymore. And then COVID came, and so I was like, okay, taking
right the way back.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna, go back to this again. And so there are sets of challenges that come with it. And as with any, as with any like change in your life, sudden shift in your life, it does take some time to get used to it. Personally, it's been 1 year and 6 months. And I think the pandemic has slowed the process of me adjusting to my new lifestyle a little bit, because I've just been mostly at home. And most recently, I've been going out and attending social events. And, aside from the fact that we're in a pandemic, I still feel like I haven't properly adjusted to my new lifestyle. And so it's just trying my level best to be patient with myself and taking it day by day. Just having like small attainable goals each month and hitting those as much as I can, instead of overwhelming myself with the big picture or with big goals. I think another big challenge that I personally struggle with is just the medication aspect, because they are quite expensive, and having the right insurance. I mean, they are quite expensive in itself, because just the cost itself, but knowing that it's lifetime causes me a lot of anxiety, as I'm sure it does for a lot of post-transplant patients. And so I think there's that pressure of just figuring everything out, or feeling that you have the need to figure everything out for yourself post-transplant. But again, what I try to do is just take it day by day, month by month, and not overwhelm myself with things or aspects of my post-transplant life that isn't hitting me now. So yeah, it's just, I remember those first 6 months as well. Your body is still healing from a major surgery. Your scar is still healing. Your new kidney is getting used to its new home. And I remember every ache or any little pain I would feel, I would just immediately jump to the worst conclusions. Yeah, I think I so many times. It was really great having a 24-hour number that I could call in case of anything. And trust me, I use that number a lot. But I think it's also just rebuilding that confidence in yourself and understanding your new body, how it's functioning. And so now I'm confident in just, if I feel something, okay, I'm noting that down. If it, continues for another day or a few weeks, then I'll bring it up to my team. But just, I think it's just learning about your new body, your new lifestyle, and just trying to fit into it as much as you can. And that takes time. So I personally thought, I'll be good to go in a year. After a year, I'll have everything sorted out. But to be honest, it's a journey in itself. And I had that misconception that, I'll be fine in 4 or 5 months after surgery, everything will go back to normal. But it takes time to get back to the new normal for yourself post-transplant. And then no less in a pandemic, crazy times that we live in. But again, just trying my best and try not to overwhelm myself with too many details. And just realizing, that that you don't have control over everything in your life. And I mean, I had that lesson when I got diagnosed and through dialysis, but reminding myself of that. And so I said that reflection is such an important part of my life, because it just centers me, grounds me, and just helps me through figuring everything out in terms of my lifestyle habits.
There's so much there that that you had to come to terms with and learn, and all those different side effects that came from the medication that you were taking, and that kind of mental transition from seeing yourself as a well person to see yourself as a sick person to seeing yourself as someone coming through that as well. And also, like you said, the responsibility of having to take care of yourself in a completely new and different way, things that you didn't have to even think about or consider before. And then on top of that, a pandemic where everything's different and everything's changed, and there's so much uncertainty. That takes a lot of strength to overcome that. That's definitely the warrior showing through right there. The fact that you've been able to go through, so much, deal with so much, and yet have such strength and have a smile on your face. So what advice would you give to somebody who has just been diagnosed with kidney disease?
Yeah, it's definitely not easy, isn't it? Just having your whole life just shifted in a matter of minutes, hours, months. Doesn't matter about the time, just it always feels so sudden, I feel like. And the advice I would give is just to take that time to process it all. Because in the flurry of getting diagnosed and starting treatments and figuring out the next step, it all can feel so overwhelming and happening so fast to you and your close and your loved ones. And so just taking that time to go through all the different stages of like denial and grief. Like, I really believe it's so important to just take that time to grieve and just come to terms with the fact that this is where you are right now. And I know what personally helped me was, like we talked about, taking that control back. The little that you can, that element of control, by educating yourself on, why, what you need to do to get better, and, what you, like the people that you'll need to help you get there. And so I know, like, something that I personally struggled with was also going into that, whole of, blaming myself for where I reached, because, through that diagnosis process, we did not figure out what caused my kidney to fail. Yes, I was born with one, but it is absolutely normal to live your life with one abnormally large kidney. And so that wasn't the true cause of my kidney failure. And the thing is, for me, I reached that critical stage where we just, from all the tests and ultrasounds and everything that we could do, there was no conclusive reason as to why my kidney failed. And I know not having that reason, not having that understanding of why this happened really, took me to some dark places of blaming myself. Was I not taking care of myself enough? I know I should have done more yearly tests, like going through the what if I could, if I did this. And so another advice I would give is not to blame yourself. This was my destiny. This was meant to happen to me one way or another. Even if I did my yearly checkups earlier, maybe I would have found that I was at stage 3 or stage 2 of kidney failure. I would have eventually got to where I am. And so not going through the what if rabbit, what if hole, just not like getting into that aspect, because it is draining and it's not going to help you right now. And also just having that support system, as I said, I feel so important. Relying on the right people to help you in those moments where you feel down. where you feel overwhelmed and just hopeless, because you are going to get those moments, especially when you just got diagnosed. It is a very, very vulnerable time for you and your loved ones. And so having that right support system, you don't have to connect with hundreds of people, but even just having that one person can make such a difference in your life, especially in such tough moments. And so highly recommend, because sometimes when you're going through such a life-changing moments, you want to do it all. You don't want to let anyone in. Not saying that, your support system will 100% understand what you're going through, but they can, because they love you and they can help you get through it, So yeah, that would be some of the advice or tips that I would give to someone who just got diagnosed or who's starting the transplant process. Every aspect of kidney failure is sort of kickstarts another journey. Like you get diagnosed and then there's dialysis, which is like a new step to it, and there's transplant. So many different sort of junctures in the journey, and so each step just taking your time with it, like emotionally dealing with how you're feeling, the best way you can, right? So that's what I would say.
That's good advice. What are the common myths that you would like to debunk about kidney disease?
Mm-hmm. I think I mentioned some of them, right? Because I talked about how transplant, there's that myth of like, transplant is an easy fix and that's all. That's one myth around just kidney health overall. I think also that myth that, kidney failure happens to older people, or like the older you are, the more at risk, which is true. The older you are, the more at risk you are of kidney failure, because it ties to hypertension and diabetes, which tends to happen the older you get. But realizing that, like your health isn't guaranteed just because you're young. And I think I talked about this quite recently online, but, and I think that's the perception I had of myself as well, throughout my 20s, right before I got diagnosed, is that perception that I don't need to do my yearly tests, that even though I was aware that I had one kidney, just that reassurance from my team, and I was much younger, that I'm completely fine with one kidney, that I don't need to be concerned about it. I think it's just, again, we talked about this, just the importance of just taking control of your health. And yes, the medical team, your doctors, nurses, they're experts in their field and they studied all of that, but you need to take control of your health as well, and not fully relying on your medical team's words as, the gospel, like this is what they said, I'm good to go, just taking that control and saying, just probing and asking questions. But that myth that kidney failure can only happen when you're older, or happen to just like, a select number of people. I think we always think about that when it comes to any tragedy, is that that's not going to happen to me or anyone that I know. There's that misconception, that myth that it's not going to touch me until it does, or until it touches someone close to you is when it hits home, but not waiting for it to hit home for you to take charge of your health. I know I'm a personal advocate, like with my family members, with everyone around me, online, just the importance of just having that yearly checkup done and just understanding where you are at in your health journey. You probably feel okay, but just it wouldn't hurt to get that validation that you are indeed okay. And that's the thing with kidney failure, is it is an invisible illness. Symptoms don't hit you until you reach chronic stage, until you reach stage 5 or stage 4, right? And so, that's what happened to me, is that my symptoms were invisible until towards the very end. And so who knows how long I was actually sick for, probably years, months, who knows? I don't have that information with me. And so just realizing that there's some illnesses, particularly with kidney failure, where it's why it's so important to have yourself checked out every year, just to understand where you are at with your health. And that's really the best way to catch anything before it gets severe, instead of waiting for it to get severe and then start having physical symptoms. By that time, unfortunately, it can be late. But yeah, that would be another myth that I would want to debunk, is just around, or just shedding light on the fact that kidney failure is invisible. And that's why it's so important to just check on how you're doing each year at the very least.
And my final question is, where can our listeners connect with you online?
Right. So online, I'm really mostly on Instagram. I would formerly call myself Kidney Diaries, but hence switched to my name. So Faduma, Faduma-Dhool, Dhool. That's my full name. So you can find me on Instagram if you'd like to connect, ask any follow-up questions from this conversation that Dee and I had. Happy to connect with anyone who would like to. But that page that I created for myself over a year ago was a space to connect with other warriors, other chronic illness warriors, because at that time, going through dialysis, going to treatments, just felt I felt out of place. Again, that, idea of why is this happening to me? I'm so young, why is this happening? Because everyone around me was quite older than I was. And so creating that page online on Instagram really helped me connect with other warriors around my age group, and just really helped me throughout my process, throughout my journey. And so, I'm in that space where I want to give back in terms of sharing my experience of how far I've come so far and what I've learned along the way, because everything I learned was just new, sort of gathering information. So whatever I gathered, I'd love to share that, and also just connect with others and learn from them as well. So please do reach out if you'd like to connect.
Thank you very much. So yes, check out Faduma's page on Instagram. So thank you so much for sharing your story with me and the listeners, and for sharing so much excellent advice, that's going to help so many people. So thank you for your time and your knowledge and your know-how and your advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dee. Honestly, thank you so much for creating a platform for, kidney warriors to share the experiences and their journey with everyone, for us to connect with one another. So thank you for having me today.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. And don't forget that you can contact me on social media using the handle Diary of a Kidney Warrior. Please do subscribe to the podcast, and please do tell a friend. New episodes of this podcast are released every Monday. Until next time, take care and choose to live.
Diary of a Kidney Warrior, sharing faith, knowledge, hope, and love.